Hi everyone. So Instagram being Instagram, it's not working the way we want it to work. This has happened to me before. I meant to be a guest speaker over on Chantal Blake's page, Honoured Womb. We tried to get it to work on her page, wasn't working. It's not accepting my request to join her on the live. So we're doing it this way around. Hopefully it works this time. Okay, so let's... Hopefully it works, inshallah. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Ya Allah, please let this work. See, it seems to be working. Yeah. Chantal, how are you?
Alhamdulillah, I'm well. I can't see you, but I can see me. Is it one of those?
Well, I can see me and you.
Okay.
Do you remember this happened to us before, actually?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And I recently, I think it was last week, I can't remember when it was, last week or the week before, I did an IG live with Her Story Inspires, and it wasn't working on her page, and then it worked on mine, and then she couldn't see me, but she could see herself, something like that. But yeah,
Okay.
it's a bit frustrating. Instagram's really weird at the moment. And the thing is, my page has been a bit censored, very shadow banned. So I don't know, it's probably something related to that, I'm assuming.
MashaAllah. And then also even tagging you. It's been hard for me to tag you in posts. Alhamdulillah. But we're here. Alhamdulillah.
How are you?
So how are you today?
Yeah, good, thank you, alhamdulillah. It's really cold here in the UK. And I just noticed all of a sudden, like half an hour before going live with you, I felt a bit like under the weather, but I was like, it's fine, we will still do the live. But if you don't see me as my usual energetic self, that's the reason.
Alhamdulillah. Allah yashfik, inshallah, whatever it is, you get relief. When I saw you, I was like, I wonder if she's sick. So I don't know if I just sensed it or maybe it's your tone or something. I was wondering if something was going on. But alhamdulillah, thank you for making the time for the conversation. Yeah, just alhamdulillah, really always glad to be talking to you. And this is an overdue conversation. Our attention and our hearts have been elsewhere, rightfully so, for the past few months. But I think we're all figuring out how to hold the relevance and the purpose of our work in the world alongside our concern and our compassion for things that are happening in other places, for conflicts and wars and everything else. And so I think all of us are figuring out how to navigate moving forward, but remaining connected and compassionate and actively engaged in the ways that we can sustain, as we see that there's a lot to sustain. This is not a overnight victory, but Allah is with the patient, and we are hopeful for success and freedom and victory.
Definitely.
I mean,
and I think everything is kind of interconnected. Some people might think that us talking about pleasure is such a luxury given the context of what's happening in the world, not just in Palestine, but in so many countries around the world. But when we're talking about pleasure in the context of it being a remedy for having a period, actually it's something essential, because half the population either are menstruating or about to menstruate, or they're at some stage in their life where their period health is really important. And if we're saying that you need to maintain good health, and one of the remedies, not the only, but one of the remedies is pleasure, that is helping that person's health. And when they are in good health, they can go out into the world and do good in the world and be an advocate for the oppressed community. So it is very relevant.
Yeah, it's very limiting. We're limited in how available we can be for service if we are really struggling ourselves, and when we are debilitated, when we are in pain and don't have capacity to show up for others or show up for ourselves even. And so, again, I feel like those of us who especially are doing work that is healing in its nature or facilitates healing, any type of healing, whether it's, healing in our relationships, healing in our bodies, healing in our minds and in our souls. We can't afford to pause that, we can't afford to seize that, because we need it even more. People need even more tools of support to get through times like this, which are really difficult and challenging and feel really unpredictable. And then just being able to come back to the body and check in, like, am I well? What do I need to support myself? Because, you know, disembodiment and dissociating from our bodies is a big part of why we endure so many things, why we stick it out and just bear and grin or whatever. So, you know, no pain, no gain, and all of these other mantras we've been taught to just bypass the body and keep on hauling, do the thing you have to do or you're supposed to do. So to take a moment to really check in with ourselves, I think is so valuable. So I'll just introduce myself, and you can do the same for folks who came on over from my page. So I'm Chantal Blake. I'm the founder of Honored Womb and author of Peaceful Periods, Holistic Womb Care for Teens. And I help women and teens experience peaceful periods and healthy, fertile wombs. And Amira, what do you do?
I'm a sex educator. I primarily help women with a sexual condition called vaginismus, where they usually present to me with conditions of finding penetrative sex very painful or difficult, or they present with having a fear of sex, a fear of intimacy. I also help women with sexual pleasure and being able to enjoy intimacy within their marriages. That's kind of 80% of the work I do. The other 20% is helping men with specific sexual issues. I also help parents provide a God-conscious sex education to their kids and teens, and that is kind of the direction I want to slowly start, not slowly, but kind of continue to build, because I really think, you know, that saying like prevention is better than cure. It's kind of like really, and I think that's similar with the work you do, is not waiting till someone is an adult and then experiencing issues that could have been resolved if they had learned the right information when they were a child or a teen. So I help everyone pretty much, but a large portion of my work is with women who have or experience vaginismus.
Yeah, and I love what you do. You know, the last time we had a conversation was I don't know if it was before Womb Wellness Week or in Womb Wellness Week. I think it was during Womb Wellness Week where we were talking about that thread between painful periods, painful birth, painful intercourse, and this idea that womanhood is just painful from beginning to end, and it's such a needed shift that that needs to happen. We need to really shift and reframe our relationship with pain and our relationship with the opposite of it, which is pleasure. So I would really love to hear for you in how you support parents in starting intimacy education and sex education with their youth in a God-centered, God-conscious way. How does pleasure come up, or how do you introduce youth to pleasure as a concept?
So a lot of the time well, in terms of how I address parents, in my course I specifically say anytime your child or teen approaches you with a question or starts a conversation about anything that makes you uncomfortable, especially if it's of a sexual health nature, if it's making you uncomfortable, firstly feel gratitude that your child or teen approached you and didn't try to just find out the answer on their own, because especially the nature of sexual health topics, sometimes there are either inaccurate information or very dangerous information out there. So if they are coming to you, shift it from your discomfort into feeling gratitude that they're coming to you, and be as open-minded as you possibly can be, and start to ask them why did they start thinking about that, but in a very positive way. So you kind of understand what's the context of their question, where did it come from, because then that provides you with an ability to address their question. And if you don't know how to answer their question, you can say, that's a great question, let me go and find out, let me go and speak to an expert or read a book about this, or go online and search for some information about this issue, and then we can have a discussion about it. So being as open-minded as possible, because and it's changing now, but there are still some parents especially who are worried about talking about certain sexual topics because they are worried that their child will become too curious and then will want to explore sexually and will want to engage in sex outside of marriage and that kind of thing, or sex before marriage. And I address that in the sense that actually, if you are not answering their questions, they are going to go and find the answers for themselves, and they might be more likely to go and do those very things that you're afraid of. But if they feel like you are a safe person to go to, that they can approach and satisfy their curiosity, you're able to guide them in alignment with your beliefs and in alignment with your faith. But for your child to go and search for those things elsewhere, they may not find information that is in alignment with their faith and beliefs. So that's kind of the starting point. And then I tend to be a very kind of reflective person. Whenever I work with my clients, I notice the issues they have, and the issues, now that I've been working with many clients, alhamdulillah, they are very common. There are a lot of common things that come up. Today I actually spoke to someone, and she was telling me that growing up in her childhood, she didn't really experience that much physical affection from her family, from her parents, from her siblings. Like, they were a really loving family. They did other things for each other, acts of service, words of affirmation, giving gifts to each other, but they didn't really hug each other much. They weren't physically affectionate. And not that there's anything necessarily wrong with that, but she presented to me with the fact that she's struggling to be physically affectionate with her husband. She's been married for about 9 months, and she's really struggling with that. And so this is what I want parents to see, is sometimes we need to kind of predict what might happen to our kids when they grow up, when they become adults, and try and prevent those things from happening. And so many times I will say to parents how important it is for you to be physically affectionate with your kids, for you to model, if you're in a marriage, to model a healthy relationship, so that they then can take that and apply that when they go off into their own lives and their own marriages. So that's just a bit about physical affection. I also like to talk about pleasure, because what I'm noticing in terms of the world that we live in is very hypersexualized, and a lot of Muslims are growing up in Western countries, but not just Western countries, because it's also happening, like, I'm half Egyptian, it's also happening in Muslim countries, in Arab countries, in Muslim populated countries, where the opportunity of having a sexual experience before marriage is very common. And so if a child is growing up in a family where they're not getting a great sex education, and then they're going to schools or interacting with people, and they are watching movies that are presenting sex as this amazing, fun thing that you get lots of pleasure from, and they don't have other forms of pleasure in their households, they're going to seek that type of sexual pleasure from that type of sexual experience. But if they've kind of filled their pleasure cup, meaning they feel satisfied and they feel good about themselves and they feel their self-esteem as much as possible that they can have from home or from their, like, immediate family and community, the idea of pleasure from something foreign like a sexual experience won't seem that appealing, because they've had their fill. So that's why I think us talking about pleasure is really important, because sometimes parents present the religion, especially Islam, and I think it happens in other religions too, they present the religion as this very restrictive thing, that you kind of have to go through this life restricting yourself all the time, and if you're struggling with that, oh well, tough, you just got to put up with it if you want Jannah. Which, you know, those parents might have good intentions, but a person growing up like that might see someone who's less religious having all the fun. And obviously humans, we are designed to kind of seek pleasure and avoid pain. And so what I want people to try and get to is a place where that's not what the religion teaches us. The religion doesn't teach us that we have to, like, suffer our way through life in order to get to Jannah. There is sometimes suffering and there is struggle. That is part of life, but that's not the purpose of life. The purpose of life is actually to seek pleasure through God-centered means. So aligning your faith with that feel-good feeling. And if you can do that, then it's going to be very easy to adhere to your religious beliefs.
I really like how you present that and just put that into context, that if people are operating that just suffer through it and then you'll get the reward at the end, how that translates into so much, I believe, unnecessary hardship. I mean, yes, there is a reward for enduring struggle, but I feel like it can really keep us from seeing how we are creating the struggle or perpetuating our own struggle, as opposed to what is a true, genuine struggle. So there are some things we struggle with that we have less control over, less influence over, and we're just because that notion of just struggle and, you know, it's your jihad, it's your personal struggle, you're going to get rewarded, you're going to get rewarded. Sometimes it can really block us from seeing what's right in front of us, which are the ways that we sabotage our own well-being, or the ways that we sacrifice more than we need to for the sake of really committing to that story. And like you said, you know, we can experience pleasure within the bounds and within the guidelines that we've been given, because obviously we're not hedonists. We don't follow our pleasure, nor do we worship our pleasure. But, you know, Allah in His generosity has given us these very clear ways to experience the pleasure that this life offers without it being a source of heedlessness, without it being a source of self-corruption, without it being a source of you know, community breakdown and degradation. And, you know, there's concern for the other, and there's concern for our own well-being as well. So it's not like, you know, you just don't experience, wait for Jannah, and that's when all the pleasure comes. And I think as a result, you know, you find that people, like I said, you know, they are very accepting and expecting of everything to be painful, particularly women.
Yeah.
So in the context of how I present menstrual health and period education, is starting with the first and primary lesson that our periods are not necessarily meant to be painful. Even though period pain is common, period pain is not normal. And for that, many people are like, well, what do you mean?
People
Even when we
are
have
very
this
shocked. People are, in my experience, whenever I've shared things about periods shouldn't be painful, I always get a response of like, what are you talking about? Of course they're meant to be painful, because it is that perpetuation of that thing. Just because it's common doesn't mean it's normal, as you just said.
Yeah, yeah, very common, but certainly not normal. And I think that's the first thing that people are taught. And I see it actually sometimes when I listen into how Muslims educate youth about menstruation. Oftentimes the conversation starts with fiqh, which I don't think is the best place to start. Because we haven't even talked about the function of menstruation. We're just like talking about days of purity and what is bleeding. And I don't feel like that's the right introduction to something that's such a natural part of our lives. And then oftentimes it's like, it could be difficult, but you're going to be rewarded for it. And that's how you get your reward of menstruation. So, one
No, no,
second, sorry.
that's fine. While Chantal, I think she's dealing with her kids, I was just going to say that I believe that pleasure is actually part of the religion. Like, if you think about certain things in the religion, I'm talking about Islam specifically, where you have enjoyment, where you are experiencing pleasure. Two examples that came to my mind, and these are things that are considered acts of worship, which means you are rewarded by Allah for doing those things, and they are things that bring a lot of pleasure. One of them is, if you think about when you finish Ramadan and you have Eid, and it's recommended to go and pray the Eid prayer in community, in congregation, that for a lot of people brings a lot of pleasure. So, sorry, Chantal, I was just giving two examples that came to my mind of how pleasure is actually part of the deen, part of the religion. The one example I was giving is, if you think of when you finish Ramadan and it's recommended to go and pray the Eid prayer in congregation, in community. For a lot of people, that brings a lot of pleasure, seeing your fellow Muslims that you might not have seen before, or, you know, meeting members of your community that you haven't met for a while, and embracing each other and enjoying that time that you get to spend together in worship. That's a form of pleasure, and you get rewarded by Allah for that. The other one that came to mind is, again, related to Ramadan or fasting, is Islam doesn't tell us to like fast for extended hours beyond the time that we're meant to set. We are meant to break our fast at Maghrib time, and we're not meant to really delay it. And that's a form of pleasure. When you've been fasting long hours and you get to eat that first date or that first bite of food, that is pleasure. So Islam does, and you get rewarded for the fact that you are breaking your fast at the time that you're meant to. So I just wanted to make it very clear that when we're talking about pleasure as a period remedy, and this is a lot of the work you do, Chantal, is a lot of women and girls associate them having a period with a week of their life that they no longer can be spiritual or religious. for obvious reasons, especially if you're Muslim, because of the fact that when a girl or woman is on her period, she's not able to pray. But people have to remember that prayer is not the only form of having a spiritual connection with God. And so I just want people to be very clear that, okay, if you have a period, which is something that God created, Allah created and blessed you with, it is important for you to take care of yourself during that time and to, first of all, have a positive association with the fact that you have a period, and then have a positive association with your body in taking care of yourself. If you are struggling with your period and you are finding it painful, and just as Chantal said, it's not meant to be painful, and if that pain is affecting you in how you show up in your life, in how you show up for your loved ones, then it is actually very important for you to seek ways to alleviate that pain and get yourself and your health to a point where that pain during your period isn't so common for you.
And I think also the sunnah, in the sunnah, the prophetic sunnah, we see examples of things that are pleasurable too, right? The things that we do to put love in the hearts of others are things that are praiseworthy. Obviously, sexual intimacy is in the sunnah, which, you know, there's also a very clear expectation and even advice that women experience the same pleasure that men do. You know, there's not this idea that women just endure and then men get pleasure in some ways. Even gift giving, I always think of tahajjud, tahabbu, like this idea that sharing gifts and it increases you in love with for other people. And like you said, with that physical affection and connection to people, like it's such a potent stress reliever. People really negate and neglect how much feeling good releases stress in your body. And oftentimes when we are so stressed, we have more inflammation in our body, which creates more pain. We have more hormonal imbalances because when we're sustaining such high levels of stress, other hormones are not able to get online or to get to their balanced equilibrium. So progesterone, for example, which is what menstruating women will make more of after we've ovulated, it's such a potent hormone in all of the things that it does, but it's also, like one of my teachers calls progesterone a shapeshifter, that it will actually offer itself, or it can be converted into more stress hormones. If we're under high levels of stress and we're not making enough, we can actually lose progesterone and it can become more cortisol, right? It can become more stress hormones to keep up with the high demands of our lives. So if you imagine that you're, you know, they call it progesterone robbing. If stress is robbing you of progesterone, then you don't have the full benefit of hormonal balance. You don't have those hormones that are going to help you feel calm and grounded and centered, or that's going to help manage or kind of balance out estrogen levels. And most of the period problems that women experience tend to be correlated with estrogen dominance. Some people have estrogen deficiency, but estrogen dominance is so much more common in our high stress modern life, right? Estrogen helps us to keep on going, but it also, high levels of stress of estrogen is connected to heavier bleeding, more clotting, fibroids, endometriosis, PCOS, and the list goes on. And so I think sometimes we think that those remedies or those conditions need like a medical intervention, and sometimes we overlook the medicine that's right in front of us, which is wholesome food, actually resting. You know, there's always this idea about sleep hacking. How little sleep can we survive on? It's like, no, Allah gave you the day for work and the night for rest. Like, why do we keep trying to figure out how much can I burn the candle from both ends? Like, how much more can I do? And not realizing that we can intend rest as ibadah. We can intend rest and caring for ourselves during our periods as ibadah. So even if we're excluded from the ritual prayer, that doesn't mean that we are barred from communicating and praying to the Creator in whatever way we do, right? We can still supplicate. We can still recite litanies or adhkar of remembrance. We can read, we can reflect, we can study, right? We know that fiqh or contemplation is an incredibly potent and heavily emphasized act of worship. Because yes, there are things that we do, but contemplation is what brings us back to why we do what we do, and who do we do what we do for whose sake are we doing it. And so I feel like having that built-in retreat in the menstrual cycle, that built-in time of slowing down, is such a powerful way to really come to the embodiment of worship and know that I am in a state of worship. I don't just do worship, like I can be in continuous worship. It's not just what other people can see I can do. So I was at we had a mom and daughter dessert date, a real talk event. So we had like an intergenerational circle with like grandmothers, mothers, and daughters. And then we had some age specific teen circles. And when I talked to the teens, when we had a teen circle together, you definitely felt that mantra of just getting through. You know, you just have to push through. Most of the youth in my group that had difficult periods and irregular periods were also athletes, some doing multiple sports. And most of them also said they don't eat breakfast. And, you know, it's just like this go, 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 keep on going, keep on doing. And I think for us as mothers and for any parents listening, one of the ways that we can help our youth restore a healthy relationship to pleasure and rest is giving them permission to experience pleasure and rest in healthy and appropriate ways. Really being curious about the, you know, permissible things that bring them delight, that bring them enjoyment, making time for that physical affection, hugging. I find that my daughter is 13 now, and she will tell me like, I need more hugs. Like, I just need a hug. And I love that she's coming to me for that co-regulation, because when we hug each other, you know, it actually rewires our brain. It affects our mental connection. It, you know, increases healing. When we feel that sense of belonging and connection with people, it turns on healing in our bodies. It helps our cells regenerate. And when we feel disconnection and we feel like we don't belong and we feel, you know, abuse, etc., then it turns on aging and it turns on disease and inflammation in the body. And so I think, like you were saying, you know, healthy forms of connection and intimacy, so that, like you said, that pleasure cup is being met at home is so powerful, that we are meeting our youth's needs for, you know, things that are enjoyable, things that are physically desirable, like enjoyable, like feeling the sensations around them that are enjoyable, and not reducing. I think it's really important that we don't reduce pleasure to consumption. So most people, when they hear pleasure, they're thinking of sexual pleasure, but then I feel like we also have this consumeristic notion of pleasure, like, ooh, pleasure is when I eat that decadent dessert from that cafe, or when I go to this luxury spa and do this thing. So I hope that as we are boycotting like every and anything, the boycott list just keeps growing. I was just like, so much. But regardless, I hope that we ourselves are orienting and modeling pleasure in healthy, natural ways, and giving space for our youth to do that. One thing with my children, all of my kids had chicken pox last year in the same month, and it was really difficult for my son. And so doing all of these different remedies, there was a point that I was massaging his body, like, because he was just so itchy and sore, and I was massaging his whole body. And even after the chicken pox were gone, he was like, "Can you massage me again? You know, can you do that again?" Or even my daughter, if she's having a stomach ache, and I offered to do like an abdominal massage or a womb massage if she's on her period, and I was like, yeah, we need to have more touch points where we're feeling that physical connection in healthy and wholesome ways, and that we're answering their need to be touched. They want to be touched.
I love that you call it touch point. Like, it's a real literal touch point that you have with your kids, and your, you know, your relatives, your family, your parents even. Like, you know what, like I'm really grateful, alhamdulillah, both of my parents are alive. Recently, like, I just decide, like, I do this, like, every time I like greet my parents, I will kiss them on their cheeks. It's like an Arab thing to do. But I don't hug them enough. I think I probably did it obviously more growing up, but as I became an adult and like left the home, whenever I go to their house, I kiss them on the cheeks, but I realize I don't hug them and like really like stay in that embrace. So I did it recently with my mum, and I could tell it was something she needed. So even our own parents need it from us. Even if you're a fully grown adult, do it with your parents. They might think you're weird and strange, especially if you don't do it enough. But the more you do it, the more normal it will become. And they need it and you need it. So do it with as many people as you can. There is someone who asked a question, which we will answer now, inshallah. But
About
before I
leg pain.
do, just wanted to say something before it comes out of my head. In terms of what you were saying about pleasure, very quickly, I know in my course I say 3 things when it comes to pleasure and experiencing more pleasure in your life. Needs to be number 1 is God conscious and faith aligned. So is that thing good and okay in your religion? Is it allowed in your religion? And according to your values and beliefs. Number 2, it needs to be something sustainable, kind of related to what you were saying in terms of consumption. And number 3 is not something that's going to harm you or others, because some people may consume drugs and get pleasure that way, but it's not something that is, good for their body in the long run. So just to kind of point out those 3 things, the person who asked a question,
I think it was about leg pain. Was
yes,
it that
exactly,
that
because I think it was
people
related to what you were talking about, like progesterone and
hormones?
cortisol and stress. Yeah, so
Yeah.
the question was, will it lead to painful legs during periods? I'll let you answer that because you're the expert.
So usually when we have leg pain during the period, oftentimes it can have a connection to low magnesium. We use a lot of magnesium. So if you tend to have leg pain, I'd recommend making sure you're really having magnesium-rich foods before and during your period. And then also you can do things like take Epsom salt baths. That's another way we get magnesium in the body. Dark chocolate is another way we can get magnesium. Like 60% cocoa or higher, 70 or 80% would be better. Um, and or you can also take a magnesium supplement. So if you tend to have leg pain as well as period pain, so usually low magnesium can show up as painful periods because magnesium is a muscle relaxant, and sometimes we don't have enough of it to relax the uterine muscle. And then sometimes the leg pain and difficulty sleeping, they all tend to correlate with low magnesium. So I would give attention to that. And sometimes just doing too much during the period, you have a strain sometimes on your arteries because your uterus is actually heavier. So sometimes just getting off of your feet and resting can help the blood circulation. If you're finding it more so like vein pain as opposed to like swelling or something like that. So
Nice. I like that. And for a lot of people, chocolate is a source of pleasure. But I agree with you. The dark chocolate is the way to go. Because
yeah.
I feel like milk chocolate or anything less than what you stated, 60% or less, I think can actually maybe make symptoms worse, especially because that will tend to have a high sugar
Yeah,
content. So the darker the chocolate, the
the
better.
less sugar.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's a lot that we're not really taught about proper period care, and I don't I don't know any sleeping pills, because I think what oftentimes like modern medicine, it's like, oh, there's a problem. Something's broken, something's not working. We need to fix it. We need to take a pill. I think it's more important to get underneath why you're experiencing difficulty sleeping.
Yeah.
Some people are not eating enough. They're not eating enough calories, and they find they're waking up in the middle of the night because their bodies are hungry, their bodies are hungry. Sometimes people are not sleeping because of stress or overuse of screens or feeling a lack of safety in the nervous system, adrenal fatigue, the list can go on. So, magnesium, like someone pointed out, I see Sister Rashida, magnesium does also help with sleep and rest and regular bowel movements. Sometimes people who struggle with constipation, magnesium deficiency can also be a factor there. So do you have do you care to share personally how you in your own household are bridging that pleasure, intimacy, education? How has it impacted, or is it impacting your period education with your daughter, if you want to share?
Yeah, definitely. So, my daughter recently got her first period. She got it literally, I think it was last weekend. and I've been preparing her. So any parents listening to this, if you have daughters who are about to, if you know they're showing signs of going through puberty, or even not, like even from as young as possible, start to get them in tune with their body. So I've been preparing her for it. I actually, and this might be TMI for some people, but I don't really care. When she was like 2 or 3 years ago, I remember showing her what my period looked like on a pad, just for her to just have that visual association of like, this is not something scary, because I didn't want her first time when she got her period to be something of a shock and something that she wasn't prepared for. So she was used to already seeing blood on a surface, on a pad, and so she felt really comfortable. She's a naturally quite so she's like very socially extroverted, but she's very shy about anything to do with her. So she came and like whispered it to me, just because she's just naturally, she's, yeah, very interesting character she is. But she came and told me, and she was like, you can tell Baba if you want, Baba is her dad, and just things like that. And so I just made it, like, I wanted to make it a really big deal, but she doesn't like attention on her, so I have to honor that. Like, she just doesn't want me to throw a huge celebration. I also told her brother is younger than her, so, and she was fine with me telling her brother. So we are that type of family where we talk about being on a period. My husband's on board too. He wasn't always like that. He was raised in an Egyptian household where, and he doesn't have a sister, so he was born in like a boy heavy household. And yeah, so my husband has kind of learned all of these things through me, of how we talk about these things with my daughter. So I think deep down she's really happy and excited, but kind of alluding to what you mentioned earlier, of like the way that some people within the Muslim community are educating about the period from a very fiqh point of view. She's now very, how do I describe what she's going through? She's now very concerned about the fact that, okay, she has to pray and she can't miss any of her prayers. And I'm trying not to stress, like, she's praying all her prayers with me, but I can feel like this is just like this big transition for her. Even though she has practiced prayer, it just feels like there was like a mental shift. And so I'm trying to still present the fact that she has her period, and she will, inshallah, continue to have her period for many, many, many years. I want to just portray that to her in the most positive way possible, which even for me is a challenge. And I also want to highlight to her the beauty of Islam and the beauty of prayer, and that actually the prayer itself can be a source of pleasure. I have a way to go with my own daughter to get her to have that mindset, because to be honest, I didn't have that mindset growing up. I was raised like, we have to pray on time, and there's all this discipline, which, yes, Islam is discipline, but we just have to be very careful when we are communicating with our kids, and obviously take into account your own child. You know your child best. I know that if I'm too harsh with her or too strict with her, it will backfire. So I need to strike the right balance to bring her to a point where she loves her period and she's really happy to be on her period, and she's really happy that she has to pray and all these kinds of things. So yeah, that's where I'm at right now. That's my personal experience with my own daughter. Everyone will have their own, journey that they go through with their own children if they have children. So yeah.
MashaAllah. Yeah, no, that's beautiful. Mabruk. Please, I made that video to my niece, that congratulations on your first period
She has
video.
your book. Her book is
Okay.
literally on her bedside table.
Alhamdulillah. That's so sweet. I think, like you said, one thing that I found that was helpful with my daughter, I did find that when she actually did have her period and realized, like, oh, I'm mature, I'm morally responsible for my actions now. And I remember her wanting like a brush up, like, can we review some things? I think I'm a little bit, so for a while I remember, like, even in the prayer, like when sitting in Jalsa, like she said, I think I know it, but like, can you just review it with me? There was a certain awareness that she took on for her own ibadah that was really interesting to watch, and just really supporting her in that. Okay, like, where do you need support? Do you want me to pray with you? Do you want me to say it a little bit audible so that you can recite with me? I think another thing that helped when I felt a lot of like resistance to the ritual of prayer was definitely focusing on prayer as an expression of gratitude, and to keep coming back to that. That's an ongoing one now with my son as well. Like, why are we praying? Why can't we just say thank you?
I
You
resonate
know?
with that so much.
And then I also find with my daughter, physical affection before and after the prayer was really helpful for her.
Oh,
So
nice.
there was a time when she was waking up for Fajr, and she, like, my husband and I would like hug her, or like we'd sit together after the prayer together, and I put my arm around her. I found that those were other things that added like a softness to how she engaged in the prayer. My son really, he went to a Quran school last year where after every prayer they would do a dhikr together, and it was kind of in like it feels like a song to him. So he just likes, singing this dhikr after very Senegalese, that, is a lot of dhikr that's sung. And so for him, that's something that he looks forward to. And he also looks forward to shaking hands after the prayer. I think that's another kind of connection point, the masafaha, like shaking everyone's hands. When we lived in Yemen, my husband, he would tell me after the prayer, everyone is like shaking each other's hand in a line. All of the men were shaking each other's hands and greeting each other, no matter how big the congregation was, which I thought was so beautiful. But then I also noticed that, are you hearing me, Amira?
Yeah,
Is
I can
someone?
hear you.
Okay.
I can hear you.
So I thought that was really beautiful. And then I also remember once I was praying with an Indonesian family, and I thought it was so beautiful that they all kissed their hands, each other's hands, but there was a hierarchy. So the younger sibling kisses the hands of their elder siblings and their parents, and then the elder siblings um, kisses the hand of their parents, and then the wife, kissing the hand of her husband. Like, it was just really interesting how that's very normalized. Like, the kissing of the hands is just part of the culture. But I feel like those little, again, those touch points can also add a little bit more depth to the prayer, whereas it's not just, okay, me having my own experience, but it feels like a shared experience. We're praying together. Even my son, who's only 3, he just loves, taqabbullah and shaking everyone's hand after the prayer. He just feels like he's missing out on the party if he doesn't.
Yeah.
So I think that's another area. So alhamdulillah, I'm really excited. Next month, I'm starting a virtual teen circle. It's called the Peaceful Period Circle for Teens. And for a long time, I was like, I do a lot of circles and online programs for women, but I was like, I feel like youth need to know who's in the circle to really open up. So I've only taught private circles and workshops for youth who come from like one particular community or group. But I said, no, the sooner, again, right, prevention is better than correction later in life. I feel like the other intention of this circle, so we have the intent is to really make the Peaceful Period book practical and applicable. So having discussions and projects, which I'm really excited about. But I feel like the other element that is another way that we can have an earlier intervention is just normalize being in circle with other women, and sisterhood, how to be in integrity as a sister in a circle. What does that look like? Because sometimes you hear girls, I don't like girls, or girls are this, or girls are that, and they are themselves girls. So one thing I've been really excited, especially as I was in the US and I was actually being in circle with actual women, I'm like, we have to teach girls from an earlier age what it means to be, to have good opinion of each other in circle, to know that their vulnerability is going to be, safe, that we have confidentiality. Like, there's certain principles about how women can be a healing for each other, and to show up in that way for each other, you do have to, leave some ego aside, and also know that I'm going to protect my sisters. I'm not going to speak ill of them. I'm not going to speak down to them. I'm not going to belittle or ridicule their questions. I just feel like that's another way that we can be healing as a community, if we were having more circular conversations with each other, instead of thinking, oh, I have a problem, I can only talk to a doctor, or I can only talk to this one person. And you have these linear conversations, and we're missing out on the healing and the wisdom of having conversations in circle with other women who don't have to be an authority. They just need to be sincere and listening and sharing their experience and story. Yes, the etiquettes of companionship. How can we be sisters to one another, even if we don't know each other? Because that's what's been happening, right? Whether I have a circle online or in person, the women, most of them don't know each other. And we just set the tone and the space for them to connect on like these very personal, intimate things. And it's something they want so badly and they need. And then they just show up so open-hearted. And so I'm praying with the teen circle that we get to start practicing. What does sisterhood look like? What does it mean to be in circle with women, and finding our space in that, and knowing that we can have a voice, and then we can also like listen, and just really be, yeah. I'm just excited. I'm excited about it. Inshallah, we start February 10th, and everywhere I've stopped when I was in the US, doing book signings, I'm just like, the teen circle is coming. Tell your girls. How old is your daughter?
Yeah. It sounds amazing. I'm assuming the link for that with all the details are in your bio. Yeah?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, it's in my bio link. What's happening with you these days? Have you been restructuring? I know that now you have mostly, are you centered on the membership access? I know the men's course has started. What's the latest in your
it's really
offering?
weird. I feel like I've come full circle in my business, where I've now reversed, like I'm the membership still exists, but it's not the business model of my business anymore. I wanted it to be that, but it just wasn't working for, I don't know what reason, probably many reasons. I used to have 3 main coaches that worked for me, providing some of the vaginismus coaching, but I've now retaken back that role as the vaginismus coach, the main vaginismus coach in my company, and lots of different reasons for that. But it just seemed to be where the demand is at the moment. I'm having people email me and message me saying they want to work specifically with me. And so I need to charge the price that I'm willing to work with private clients in that capacity. I do also offer group coaching for anyone that can't afford the private coaching. All the details for everything I offer are in the link in my bio. It's under, and you can just literally go to my website and it's on the services tab of what I offer. But yeah, I feel like I've come full circle, because it went from me offering vaginismus coaching and my one main course, Confident Marital Sex, and then branching out into a course for men, a course for women on pleasure, a course for parents to help them with their issues with their kids and their teens. But the demand has still always been in helping women overcome vaginismus. And so that's where I've come back to, is helping my private clients with those issues. I will still continue to help men and women and parents. But yeah, it just seems like right now, women who are experiencing painful sex and vaginismus are not finding faith-aligned resources or faith-aligned people to help them. That woman I told you about that came on the call today, she mentioned to me that she is struggling sexually in terms of physical affection with her husband, and she has a therapist, and her therapist recommended, obviously I'm keeping her confidential, you don't know who I'm talking about, but I'm just bringing this to the forefront of this is not the first time I've heard what I'm about to say. Her therapist, who is not a Muslim, recommended that she goes and watches porn and goes and watches movies of a sexual nature to help her to get to know herself sexually. And so she came to me saying, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do something against my religion just because
And I think even that's advice. Like, how is that even helpful advice when we know how damaging, like, and it's not just even an ethical issue, like it's staged, like it's,
I told her that. I was like, it might actually make things worse. I said that to her. I was like, it probably make things worse. Anyways, what I'm trying to highlight is I think a lot of people, especially in the Muslim community, but not just the Muslim community, are in a situation where they are having issues sexually, whether they're married or not, and they want to overcome that issue in a faith-aligned way. And it seems like there are a limited number of us. It's not just me. There's other people, Village Auntie, Ifat Rafiq, yourself, so many other wonderful men and women, Habiba Kande, so many. There are quite a lot of us, but there's still not enough of us. So they are finding that they, you know, come across my profile and they want to work with me. So that's kind of why I've kind of gone full circle in my business.
Alhamdulillah. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I'd love to chat with you about business stuff offline because, I really appreciate how you really stay very centered and very clear about your focus. And yeah, similarly with me, I'm still figuring out, or still, I feel like every year I have to kind of assess what's the need now,
Yeah.
and what's the thing that lights me up. So that's also another element of it is like, well, where there's a need, where is the need and my passion aligning most effectively, that it's sustainable on all levels, that I have the energy to sustain it, that I have the time and interest and the resources to sustain it. And so I feel like similarly, I'm also coming kind of like seeing where all those circles, the Venn diagram, where all those circles kind of overlap, so that it can really tap into what feels the most nurturing and most in service of the people who are seeking, support. And like you said, sometimes people are just committed to you, they've built trust in you. So it's not enough to say, well, I've trained my team member and she's here for you. It's like, no, I've built trust with Amira. Like, that's who I want to. And it's a lot. Once you've already built trust with one person, it's hard to then translate that to another. And so I find for me also that I'm transitioning away from one-off consultations, because I find that a lot of times there's not the people who do just want to book one consultation are often not committed enough for us to get to the results. And I found another practitioner. She's actually a mentor of mine, and she's so nurturing, and she has more available time for a lot of the hand holding and the checking up, and did you do it, how was this? And there's a lot of effort that can go into supporting someone in their compliance, I guess, of what you're recommending. And so for me, I'm also just focusing on coaching clients that have a more 3 to 6 month long-term commitment, and so that we can see the results, so that the investment is there and that we're both invested in getting the results and seeing them. It's a win for all of us when we're actually getting to the goal. So I definitely feel you on that. The Teen Circle is a newer offering that I haven't done publicly in a couple of years. And so like you said, sometimes it's just testing it. And then the other thing that changed, and then I'll stop talking about business, that I also thought like, oh, I'm just going to pool everything in my membership and it's going to be such great value for everyone. But realizing that people sometimes feel like the commitment to a membership, it can be intimidating for some people or triggering for some people. And so I'm going to, inshallah, my intention this year is to give people more options to do like a one-off offering, circle, program, and for the membership to be there. Instead of saying the only way you access this is as a member, I'm just going to give people, I'm going to let people make their choices. I think it's better value to be a member, but some people are committed to like one-time payment and I'm done. So.
No, absolutely. I literally feel the same way, because that's what I wanted to achieve from the membership, is have everything in there, including group calls with me. That was included in the membership. And it was a very low price, what I'm offering now. What I was offering then in the membership, I don't offer it that way anymore. I offer 2 different types of membership. And it's literally only there for people who can't afford to buy my course one-off. So the membership is there, they get access to several courses, but no calls with me. And that's a low, affordable monthly price for anyone who wants to join the membership. Obviously, it is a membership, so they could cancel it, a few months down the line if they didn't need it. But that's literally there for people that can't afford the one-off payment for my course. And even with my courses, I offer payment plans, even on my courses. So that's the only reason I've kept it, is just for that affordability. To provide it to be a bit more affordable for people. And then I've changed it to now where I have a membership that does offer calls, but that's a higher price. And those calls are group calls. And then the package that I will always recommend to people if they can afford it is to work with me privately, because that is where you're going to get the results you want. But I'm aware that not everyone can afford my private coaching package, so they have the other options.
Yeah, no, that's valid. Alhamdulillah. Thank you for sharing that, because, you're still the go-to. Anytime someone talks about vaginismus, I'm like, go to Amira. Like she will, alhamdulillah, Allah has really given you an experience and a calling to really show up for women in a way that not everyone can do. Like there's some support that I can offer, but I can't offer that as someone who's experienced and overcome it. And I think that's another reason why I'm doing less like fertility calls and coaching too. I work with women one-on-one who are having fertility challenges, but like group course on fertility, I'm finding also that people feel more drawn when the person they're working with overcame that obstacle, and that's not something I can speak to in quite the same way. I haven't gone through failed IVF. I've had pregnancy losses, but I haven't gone through a similar journey where, I have children, and sometimes even that's another barrier that people feel like, you're helping, but you can't really feel where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
So I don't know what your time availability is. Do you have time to respond to these questions, or do you want to just answer them in the chat later? Do you have a time boundary today?
I can't see where the questions are. Can you see the questions?
Well, maybe it's a comment, not really a question. Someone said in Pakistan, they noticed that after a couple stops having children, they stop having sex, and that connection tends to get lost, and that's really a shame that people reduce sexual intimacy, like the act of worship that is sexual intimacy, to just making babies. It really does impact your nervous system. It calms your nervous system. It releases stress from your body. There is a correlation between, sexual intimacy and less period pain or more regular periods. These correlations are not made up. They're hormonal and they're real, but this is, pleasurable intimacy, not just functional intimacy. And I think that's the nuance. You don't get the health benefits of just showing up. You actually get the health benefits from fully being present and enjoying and being communicative of what brings you pleasure and what doesn't, within the marital context. So I guess you're right, there aren't really any questions. So inshallah, I'm gonna go, but always lovely chatting with you. I'm so excited you have my book and that your daughter has it, and it was really, really touching to see mothers and their daughters with my book, especially when I remember when their moms were just having them, right? Like I remember when their moms were pregnant or when they were babies, and now to see like, oh my gosh, you did not have only grown, but like my book is growing with you. And that's such a tender thing. Do you want to talk about your book or not today?
No, not today. The whole thing. Okay. So not today, but inshallah one day.
Inshallah, next conversation, inshallah.
Okay, inshallah.
All right. Thank you for your time. All right. Have a good day.
You too.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Alaikum salam.